History Network show is Sunday, July 25th, 2021, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. And I had some topics laid out for today's show, and I was tossing them around, seeing topics we were going to do updates on and things like that. And some of these topics we're going to move to Monday's show. But I got the news today that civil rights leader, civil rights pioneer, and teacher, instructor, mathematician, Bob Moses passed away today at age 86. Bob Moses, 1960s civil rights leader, passed away today at age 86. He worked with Ella Baker, worked with Fannie Lou Hamer. He helped start the 1964 Mississippi Freedom Summer Project. He co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in 1964. He was a brilliant man. And I saw him in Eyes on the Prize. I remember seeing him in Eyes on the Prize. I have the Eyes on the Prize DVD series. I have the series on DVD. I have the box set of it. Ordered it from Amazon. The 3 DVD box set of Eyes on the Prize is the first installment that deals with 1955 to about 1965, dealing with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And I remember seeing Bob Moses in Eyes on the Prize. So we're going to talk some about Bob Moses. He developed a reputation for extraordinary calm in the face of violence as he helped to register thousands of voters and trained a generation of activists in Mississippi in the early 1960s. And that was very, very dangerous work. One of the people he worked with, and he worked with SNCC as well. He was one of the early members of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He's one of the early members of SNCC. Which was founded Easter 1960. One of the people he worked with was Charles E. Cobb Jr. Charles E. Cobb Jr. is the author of one of my favorite books, and I have it around here somewhere. I taught 2 classes today. You got to bear with me because the office is screwed up. I have books everywhere. Okay, I taught 2 online African history classes today. But Charles E. Cobb Jr. is the author of one of my favorite books about the civil rights movement. One of my favorite books of all time, but it's about the civil rights movement. It's called This Nonviolent Stuff That Gets You Killed: How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible. That's Charles E. Cobb Jr. And Charles E. Cobb Jr. and Bob Moses also wrote a book together called Radical Equations, Civil Rights from Mississippi to the Algebra Project. And Bob Moses founded the Algebra Project, which is designed to teach children algebra, but teach them philosophy as well, because he had a master's in philosophy, master's of arts in philosophy from Harvard University. So we'll talk some about Bob Moses, okay? And then, earlier in the week, I think it was earlier this week. I'm on 6 days a week, so I can't keep my days straight. Earlier in the week, we talked about Jamaica petitioning Great Britain and Queen Elizabeth II. Petitioning Great Britain and Queen Elizabeth II for reparations. Okay. And we know that Jamaica was a colony of Great Britain after Great Britain took over Jamaica from Spain, right? And, these are things we deal with in my online class. And also we know that Jamaica, Haiti, we've been talking about the assassination of Jovenel Moise. And on Friday, either Thursday or Friday show, we talked about the Ariel Henry being installed as the new prime minister of Haiti. And we know the funeral for Jovenel Moise happened, I think it was Friday. Okay, so we've been covering that here on the show. and we'll give you another update this week. It's just so much to cover. But Haiti, Jamaica, and Cuba are all in the news right now. And these were all island nations, island countries that were conquered by Christopher Columbus in 1492 and 1494. And these island nations are still feeling the effects of what happened 520 some odd years ago. All right. Jamaica, Haiti, and Cuba. They're still feeling the effects of what happened 500 some odd years ago. So we're going to talk about this. There was a segment on the Cross Connection, Tiffany Cross on MSNBC, and she dealt with this, and she interviewed my friend, Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, associate professor of history at Ohio State University. And Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries is a nephew to one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. And we had Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries here on the show last year. I need to reach out to him again. We need to bring him back on to discuss some of these historical topics. But after the passing of John Lewis, middle of last year, July of last year, the passing of John Lewis, and then the funeral of John Lewis, we had him on to talk about comments that Bill Clinton made at the funeral of John Lewis, and comments that Bill Clinton made about Kwame Ture Stokely Carmichael. And he said that for a few years, the civil rights movement went in the wrong direction, went in the direction of Black power. OK, and he was saying that was the wrong direction. All right. Well, it's important to understand that the Black Power movement comes out of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Ella Baker helps to found SNCC. And Ella Baker was a co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957, along with Dr. King. So, contrary to the way they portray this history in school and, cartoons or what have you, Dr. King didn't control the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was more than about one person. And I would argue it's more than about individuals. It's about all these unsung heroes, and it's about movements of people. It's about groups of people. But we'll talk about, I'm going to share that excerpt of the Cross Connection with you from Tiffany Cross's show, dealing with Jamaica petitioning Great Britain for reparations. Britain ruled Jamaica as a forced labor colony for nearly 200 years, with the Caribbean countries serving as the center of the Atlantic slave trade. So Great Britain is going to take over Jamaica from the Spanish. And as you go through and look as these European nations are conquering other people's lands and stealing and taking over other people's countries, you're going to see these European nations, these Europeans that have been fighting each other for hundreds of years. You're going to see them fight each other over these European nations, fight each other over areas in Africa. And prior to them becoming nations, they were kingdoms. They were kingdoms. And you have the Vandals and the Visigoths and the Alans, the Picts, the Franks, the Lombards, the Jutes, the Anglos, the Saxons, all of them. And they're going to organize. They're going to be now they're collectively known. This is history. This is not me. This is not me saying this. They're collectively known as Germanic people or barbarians, because this, when they talk about the barbarians, this is who you're talking about: the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Lombards, the Jutes, the Alans, the Anglos, the Saxons, the Franks. These were barbarians, Vikings. So they're going to organize themselves into kingdoms. Then from kingdoms, they organize themselves into nation states. So when we see the Spanish and the French and the Portuguese, and we see the Dutch and these different European nations fighting each other over these new lands that they're conquering in the 1500, late 1400s, 1500s, etc., 1600s. These people have been fighting and killing each other for hundreds of years. So we'll talk about Jamaica. Jamaican officials prepare to demand reparations from the United Kingdom over slavery. It's expected the petition is going to demand somewhere around $10 billion from Great Britain and Queen Elizabeth II. And this is why I said back May 19th, I think it was 2018, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, I said Meghan Markle was married into a family of colonizers. I said it then. I said it before I watched the royal wedding. I said it right after I watched the royal wedding. I said she married into a family of colonizers. I'm not calling them colonizers because they're white. I'm calling them colonizers because 100 years ago, Great Britain had colonized 1/5 of the world population. They were colonizers. And when you go study what happened in Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, Puerto Rico, things like this, you're going to see these European nations, especially the British, setting up sugarcane plantations. And these are brutal sugarcane plantations. We see it in Haiti with the Spanish first, and then the French. We see it in Jamaica as well. We see it in Cuba. Today, sugar, I think, is still one of the top 3 exports out of Cuba. Today also would have been the 80th birthday of Emmett Till if a white woman named Carolyn Bryant had not lied on Emmett Till. Now, thegrill.com has an article about this. There is a Emmett Till was honored by 2 Mississippi museums today on what would have been his 80th birthday. We know Emmett Till was from Chicago. He was 14 years old. He was killed by J.W. Millam and Roy Bryant after Roy Bryant's wife, Carolyn Bryant, lied on Emmett Till. But the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum and the Museum of Mississippi History, which are both located side by side in Jackson, Mississippi, on Sunday, July 25th, 2021, gave a 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. guided tour that highlighted Emmett Till's life and legacy. We know it was in Money, Mississippi that Emmett Till was lynched August 28th, 1955. And we know that Mississippi, where Bob Moses was organizing African Americans to gain the right to vote, and Fannie Lou Hamer was organizing, and Charles E. Cobb Jr. was organizing, and Medgar Evers was organizing. We know Mississippi was the state with the largest number of lynchings from 1882 to 1968. There were 4,743 people lynched in the U.S. from 1882 to 1968. 72% of them were African Americans. We know 1,297 of them were white people, because we know the Klan and other domestic terrorist organizations were not just lynching African Americans, but they were also lynching white Republicans, especially shortly after the Civil War ends and during the Reconstruction era. So Emmett Till was killed in Money, Mississippi, August 28th, 1955. And 2 museums there honored Emmett Till today. We'll talk some about that also. I'll also give you an update on the new exciting online course, 10-week online course that I'm teaching, called From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. This is a 10-week online course. Class number 1 just started Saturday, July 24th. I teach this class on Saturdays, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do the classes live. All the sessions are recorded. You can watch from around the world. Okay. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. and scroll down the home page. You'll see the information for our radio show. You can click here to listen to audio podcasts of our shows, but we have the information here for the 10-week online course. This will blow you away. Click on register here. It takes you to the next page. Click on enroll. As soon as you register, you can start watching the course content. It's regularly $130. It's on sale $80. You can watch class 1. We have bonus content there also. Also, as a bonus, you'll get my 6 DVD. You'll get my 6 letter bundle pack dealing with Black Migration 1619 to 2019. Black Migration 1619 to 2019. Okay, you'll get that as a bonus as well. That's a $60 value. All right, we'll deal with this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
First station, the oldest radio station in town since 1922.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, July 25th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Now, in the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts. You can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. We deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events and history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, the 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, the 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. Let's jump into this information here, then with Bob Moses. Then we'll go to the phone lines. Okay. So I was reading a really good article about Bob Moses from this one here is from New York Times. I read the one from the New York Times, Associated Press, and then also the Washington Post as well today. But the New York Times has a good piece on Bob Moses. Bob Moses, crusader for civil rights and math education, dies at 86. Now, as of the time of this show, no cause of death has been given yet. But, this is a big loss. And he was, even though I think he was underrated. He probably wasn't. He's underrated. He was an excellent organizer, but he is not as well known as some other people like a John Lewis or a Medgar Evers or something like that. But I mean, they referred to him as the Taylor Branch in the book Parting the Waters. Taylor Branch in the book Parting the Waters. This Pulitzer Prize winning account of the early civil rights movement, told the New York Times in 1993 when speaking about Bob Moses. He said that in Mississippi, Bob Moses was the equivalent of Martin Luther King. He said in Mississippi, Bob Moses was the equivalent of Martin Luther King. All right. So this is somebody who is in Eyes on the Prize, may not be a household name like some other civil rights. I had to teach. Let's see. I had to teach one class Saturday and 2 classes today. All right. So, and then do the show. All right. So it's been a busy weekend. Okay. How was your weekend? Okay. I know what I was doing. I was working. Okay. All right. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600. Okay. So right before the break, we were talking about Bob Moses, and I was sharing this excerpt from the New York Times article dealing with his passing. And we were looking at a statement here also from Derek Johnson of the NAACP. Now, in 1960, Bob Moses left his job as a high school teacher in New York City for Mississippi, where he organized poor, illiterate, and rural African-American residents, and quickly became a legend among civil rights organizers. Over the next 5 years, he helped to register thousands of voters and trained a generation of organizers in makeshift freedom schools. And in Mississippi, they're dealing with when we talk about segregation in the South, one of the things that is not talked about in conjunction with segregation, I think, as much as it should be, is how segregation was enforced. See, segregation was enforced with cross burnings, beatings, lynchings, but then also 1954, after Brown versus Board of Education, U.S. Supreme Court case that rules that segregation in schools is unconstitutional. The White Citizens Council is going to be founded in Mississippi, and the White Citizens Council is going to spread through the South. And the White Citizens Council, they were like the Klan without the hoods. And they were made up of white bankers and landowners, plantation owners, business owners, things like this. And they organized to maintain segregation. So if you were an African-American farmer and you registered to vote, next thing you know, the bank could call your loan in because the president of the bank or somebody was a member of the White Citizens Council. Byron Della Beckwith, who assassinated Medgar Evers in June of 1963, he was a member of the White Citizens Council. The White Citizens Council in Mississippi is going to throw its weight behind Ross Barnett and get Ross Barnett elected as governor of Mississippi. So one of the things we talk about the beatings and we talk about the church burnings and things like this, but you have to understand, and the lynchings, etc. But this was used to enforce the segregation codes, the Jim Crow laws. This was used to enforce segregation. So oftentimes we talk about some people talk about segregation. We talk about we own businesses and things like that. Well, that was in some places. There was still poor, destitute people, even in areas where African Americans own businesses and things like that. You have poor people in Tulsa, Oklahoma. When you had the Greenwood district and Tulsa's at its height, you had poor people there too. You had poor people who went into South Tulsa to go work for white people. They were domestics. So a lot of times people look at segregation retrospectively and talk and say, oh, we own businesses and things like that. Yeah, but you don't deal with how segregation was enforced, how the Jim Crow laws were enforced, the domestic terrorism behind enforcing the Jim Crow laws. And even at the height of economic empowerment in this country in the 1920s, you still had a lot of African Americans in poverty. I'm all for economic empowerment. My degree's in business administration. I taught entrepreneurship for 7 years and helped African Americans start businesses and get funding for businesses. But at the same time, oftentimes we don't deal with how the segregation was enforced. So white segregationists, including local law enforcement officials, responded to Bob Moses' efforts with violence. At one point during a voter registration drive, a sheriff's cousin bashed Bob Moses' head with a knife handle. Bleeding, Bob Moses kept going, staggering up the steps of a courthouse to register a couple of African-American farmers. Only then, after he registered the farmers, did he seek medical attention. There was no African-American doctor in the county, Bob Moses later wrote. So he had to be driven to another town where 9 stitches were sewn into his head. Another time, 3 Klansmen shot at a car in which Bob Moses was a passenger as it drove through Greenwood, Mississippi. Bob Moses cradled the bleeding driver and managed to bring the careening car to a stop. Arrested and jailed many times, Bob Moses developed a reputation for extraordinary calm in the face of horrific violence. Extraordinary calm in the face of horrific violence. Taylor Branch, the author of the book Parting the Waters, a Pulitzer Prize winning account of the early civil rights movement, told the New York Times in 1993 that, quote, in Mississippi, Bob Moses was the equivalent of Dr. Martin Luther King. In Mississippi, Bob Moses was the equivalent of Dr. Martin Luther King. Also, you'll see this mural here with Fannie Lou Hamer, and you see Bob Moses wearing glasses as well. That's how he looked in Eyes on the Prize. A mural of civil rights leaders, including Bob Moses, second from the left, was unveiled at Jackson State University in Mississippi on Saturday. Okay, Jackson State, Mississippi, on Saturday. Now, although less well known than some of his fellow organizers, such as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, and John Lewis, Bob Moses played a role in many of the turning points in the struggle for civil rights. He volunteered for and later joined the staff of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, where he focused on voter registration drives across Mississippi, which was extremely dangerous. That was extremely dangerous to that. That's when Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney were killed June 21st, 1964 in Philadelphia, Mississippi. He was also a director of the Council of Federated Organizations, another civil rights group in the state of Mississippi. Bob Moses also helped to start the 1964 Mississippi Freedom Summer Project, which recruited college students in the North to join African-American Mississippians in voter registration campaigns across the state, according to the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute at Stanford University. And they have a Dr. King Institute online at Stanford University's website. They have a ton of information there on Dr. King and his writings, the King papers, things like this, right? And, you know, how should I say this? I would encourage, let me put it like this. I don't go to a lot of Dr. King Day celebrations. I don't get to speak at a lot of Dr. King Day celebrations often. But the few that I do attend, one would get the impression that even though I know a lot of people mean well and things like that, but one would get the impression that a lot of people organizing the Dr. King Day celebrations never really studied Dr. King, never read any of Dr. King's books or anything like that. So that, you know, one would get that impression. And I remember speaking at, and I'm trying to pull this up here. Let me close this out. I remember speaking at the King Day celebration. This was a few years ago. This was, what was this? I think this is before Trump was in office. So it was like 2015, 2016, something like that. And I'm doing, you know, I'm on stage and I'm doing a presentation dealing with Dr. King and the civil rights movement. And I started talking about the Deacons for Defense and Justice. Okay. And I was younger then, so I was probably a little more forceful with it. I know there were children in the audience, so I didn't want to traumatize the children, but I started talking about the Deacons for Defense and Justice and how the civil rights movement was not a nonviolent movement. And if it had not been for Negroes with guns, there would not have been a civil rights movement and things like this. I was telling the truth. And then I showed the cover of the book The Deacons for Defense and Justice. And then I showed the cover of the book, This Nonviolent Stuff That Gets You Killed, How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible. And I started dealing with the history. And I said, you mean to tell me that the Deacons for Defense and Justice are not part of the civil rights movement? Because, they had guns? You trying to tell me that Robert F. Williams and the Black Guard is not part of the civil rights movement? I started dealing with the history. Okay. They ain't asked me to speak again at Dr. King Day celebration. I spoke at Kwanzaa celebrations at the Charles Red Museum. They ain't asked me again to speak at Dr. King Day celebration. I can't figure out why. Because they can't invalidate anything that I said. I told the truth. All right. So I want to go to this clip here. This is from Real News. This deals with the formation of SNCC. This is Bob Moses talking about the formation of SNCC in 1960. Let's go to this clip. Oh, you know what? We're coming up on a break. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. We're coming up on a break here in a minute, so we'll squeeze that in on the other side of the break. Let me go back to this article here. We'll do it a little bit more. And then also we're going to talk about Jamaica petitioning Great Britain for reparations. Okay. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, Superstation, Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, July 25th, 2021, and we are live. So right before the break, we were talking some more about the passing of civil rights leader, organizer of SNCC, co-founder of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in 1964, founder of the Algebra Project, Bob Moses. All right. Now, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. We're here 6 days a week. And this is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN Show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These others are fake African History Network Cash App accounts that people set up. I've already contacted Cash App to try to get these shut down. And then also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, you can support us through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Okay. We had a great class on class number 1 on Saturday of my new online course, 10-week online course, From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power. Okay. And this class, each class will deal with, it's a 10-week online course. Each class will deal with approximately a 10-year period of time from 1865, and then go through Reconstruction and Jim Crow era, Civil Rights Movement, World War I, World War II. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on register here, and you can register for that 10-week online course. It's regularly $130. It's on sale $80. We do the class live. All the sessions are recorded, so you can watch it over and over again. And even after the course is over with, even next year, you'll still have access to the course content. All right. I want to go to this clip here. This is Bob Moses talking about the formation of SNCC in 1960. Let's go to clip 2, please.
Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Paul J. in Baltimore, and this is Reality Asserts Itself. We're continuing our series of interviews with Bob Moses, who was one of the most influential leaders of the civil rights movement. He's the founder of the Algebra Project. He was also one of the leaders of the Mississippi Freedom Summer Project. And Bob joins us again in the studio. Thanks for joining us. Yes. So one more time, Bob is an educator, civil rights activist. During the 60s, he was a field secretary for SNCC. He also was an outspoken critic of the Vietnam War. And he's the founder of the Algebra Project. As I mentioned, he's also the author of Radical Equations, Civil Rights from Mississippi to the Algebra Project, and co-editor of Quality Education as a Constitutional Right, creating a grassroots movement to transform public schools. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So we're going to pick up where we were. I asked you at the end of the last segment what you learned from the sit-ins and then what effect that had on you.
I knew that something big was going on, right, because I knew about my uncle. I knew about, what the lynchings and stuff like that. So I went down to visit Uncle Bill on my spring break. And so at this point in my life, I've been at Harvard. I've gotten an MA. So I graduate from Hamilton in 56. I spend a year at Harvard. I pick up my MA. I'm back there trying to get a doctorate when my mother passes. Right? She's really still young. She's in her early 40s. My father just goes, he deteriorates, right, and he ends up in the hospital. So I leave, go back to New York, and get a job, eventually teaching at Horace Mann School, teaching math. And I'm there when the sit-ins break out. And so I go down on my spring break to see my Uncle Bill.
Go down where?
To Hampton, Virginia, right? So the students at Hampton are marching, demonstrating in Newport News, right? So I march with them over and walk the picket line while they sit in. And Wyatt T. Walker comes down to do the mass meeting. Now, Wyatt eventually becomes the head of King's organization, right? But right then, he's a minister in Petersburg. He announces that they're going to set up an office in Harlem to raise money for King. So I get all the information and go back and go to the organizing meeting. Bayard Rustin is running that organizing meeting and ran the office, right? And so I go down every afternoon after school and volunteer at the office. And I meet Jack Odell, who later becomes King's over his citizenship program, helping to run the program that Septimus Clark developed in South Carolina. So they actually, Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier headline the fundraising event. They do it at the Armory where my father's working, right, the 369th Armory, right? And after the event, I asked Bayard if I can go down and work with King. I'm thinking he's still in Alabama. So he tells me, well, I'll send you to Ella Baker in Atlanta, right? So Ella was actually at that time King's executive director, right, of SCLC. And so I get down that summer to Atlanta, and there in the office, Ella has a little room in the office. King uses his father's office at the church. Dora is his secretary, and Jane Stenbridge, is a young white volunteer who had been at the Union Theological Seminary and came down to the meeting that Ella called that formed SNCC and volunteered to be the first executive secretary for SNCC. So she's in the office there. We hit it off because philosophy and theology, right? We're talking all the time. And so that is where I learned about SNCC. And that's where I begin the journey that eventually takes me to Mississippi.
So what year are we in?
So this is 1960. The sit-ins hit in February 1st, 1960. Ella had organized on Easter weekend in 1960 the conference to bring the sit-in leaders together. And she did that because Ella had been working across the South throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s. So she knew everybody who had actually worked in the South against this racial apartheid, right? So she made, through her contacts, got the sit-in leaders to come to her university. She graduated Shaw in North Carolina, right? So at that meeting, she actually did something that impacted later all the work that I did, which was she created a space that protected the organizers, the leaders of the sit-in from the older civil rights organizations that wanted them as a youth wing of their operation. So she kind of insisted and created a space so that they could come together and form their own organization. And that's how the SNCC came into being. And that happened on that Easter weekend.
And somewhere here, you decide, or it kind of happens that this becomes your life?
Well, what happens is what they do they set up a coordinating committee. Marion is the first chairperson. And while I'm working, I'm doing this volunteer work. I'm staying at the YMCA in Atlanta. The coordinating committee comes and has its first meeting that summer in Atlanta. And they decide that they're going to have a conference in the fall for sit-in leaders from across the South. And Jane has to be the organizer for the conference, right? She's their secretary. And she comes to me and says, I have a problem. I don't have any names from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana of any people who sat in or any kind of sit-in activity in those states. And asked me if I will go scout, right? So I agree. She and Ella get together, and Ella knows all of the really NACP or SCLC leadership in those states, gives the contact information to Jane. Jane writes letters to them saying that SNCC is sending its field representative, right, to come. And so I take off. They put me on a Greyhound bus. I take off. Talladega, Birmingham, Clarksdale, Cleveland, Jackson, Shreveport, New Orleans, and Biloxi, Gulfport, Biloxi, Mobile, back to Atlanta.
And now you'd been in New York. Clearly there was a black world and a white world, but you'd been in this, elite education. But is this your first real drenching in the Deep South?
Yeah, this is the first time. I mean, our family once, I know at least once, maybe twice, our whole family when we were young went down to visit Uncle Bill. Right.
So how did that feel? What was the impression?
Well, I was young. Right.
I mean this trip.
This trip now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a scout, right? I'm also somehow representing this very militant sit-in organization. There's an expectation. So at the bus stop in Atlanta, they're watching to see where I sit when I get on, right? So I sit up front until we get to the Georgia line, and I go back. So when the bus hit Anniston, which is where later the Freedom Rider bus was bombed, the highway patrol guy comes on, but I'm in the back. He can't tell me from anybody else. Right? When I go to Clarksdale, right, Aaron Henry sees me off. They're watching where I sit up front, but nobody else is on the bus. And so, but when I get to Cleveland, Amzie, he's working at the post office. They've actually cut his hours down, so he only works Saturdays, right? But he's not home. I go over to the post office, but he tells me the rumor is that the Freedom Riders that these sit-in riders have come to town, right? So, but really, I'm really working as a scout, undercover, so to speak. I'm trying to be as inconspicuous as I can.
But your now direct experience with the apartheid, I mean, it's not that it doesn't exist in New York, but it doesn't exist to the extent it did in the South. Does did that impress you in a specific way, or is kind of just what you expected?
Well, what I'm being exposed to is, and really through AMSI, it was the first one who really begins to take me in. I spend several days there. And AMSI is the one who tells us what we should do, right? I mean, he really is the one that says, he's compiling the information about voter registration in the Delta. And it blows my mind because I've been to all these schools, but no one, and we're talking about, the Iron Curtain. People are giving lectures at Horace Mann and everybody. Oh, these people have to vote over there in Eastern Europe and everything. And nobody ever said anything about this congressional district in Mississippi, which is 80% black in terms of eligible voters, that has never sent a black person to Congress, right?
All right. Pause it right there. Pause it right there.
Is plotting how we're going to. And
all right, pause it right there, Anthony. Or Jalen.
And the youth energy. He's the only one.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're going to continue that clip on tomorrow's show. That's from The Real News. That's on YouTube. Bob Moses is talking about the formation of SNCC during Easter 1960. Okay. And he talked about this congressional district in Mississippi that was 80% black, and it never sent an African American to Congress. There was I referenced the book, This Nonviolent Stuff That Gets You Killed, How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible. Okay. I'm going to talk about that for a minute. We're going to go to clip 3 in just a minute, guys, dealing with Jamaica. But this piece right here from SNCCdigital.org. Bob Moses talked about Marion Barry, two-time mayor of Washington, D.C. Marion Barry was the first chairman of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And this piece here from SNCCdigital.org talks about the formation of SNCC. An important aspect of the Black Power idea was centered on gaining elected office, and SNCC's first chairman, Marion Barry, personified this. He got his start in the Nashville sit-in movement and later became the second African-American mayor of Washington, D.C. As a graduate student in chemistry at Fisk University in the late 1950s, Marion Barry was committed to campus activism. On February 3rd, 1960, Marion Barry joined 124 other students, several of who, like John Lewis and Diane Nash, would also help found SNCC later in about April or so of 1960, two or three months later, in organizing a series of sit-ins in downtown Nashville. This is the Nashville, Tennessee protest, and then it's going to lead to the Nashville, Tennessee boycott of the downtown business district during Easter 1960. They deal with this in episode 3 of Eyes on the Prize, called Ain't Scared of Your Jails. They deal with this whole protest and sit-in. All right. This kind of direct political action was characteristic of Marion Barry's approach. Quote, you don't talk about making a change, you do something about it. You don't talk about making a change, you do something about it. Okay, so he wasn't trying to hashtag his way to freedom. I guess you can say. They weren't. They didn't think they were going to hashtag their way to what they wanted. Okay, so read this here from SNCCdigital.org. This is about Marion Barry. We'll post this link here on the thread of our broadcast. Now, also, I talked about the book, This Nonviolent Stuff That Gets You Killed. how guns made the civil rights movement possible. And I'm looking through 5 stacks of books and the bookcase behind me, and I still can't find my copy of the book. It's somewhere here. But if we, I've talked about this before. If we look at here, this is on Amazon. Not saying buy from Amazon, check with your local African-American book dealer, but they have a synopsis of the book here. The synopsis of the book. Now, this is written by Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., okay, who was a field secretary for SNCC for 5 years in rural Mississippi. Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. And you should be able to Google, it should be on YouTube, the interview that Roland Martin did with him on News One Now. Okay. But here's a synopsis of the book. Visiting Martin Luther King Jr. at the peak of the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott, which is December 5th, 1955 to December 5th, 1955 to December 20th, 1956. Okay. It lasts 381 days. Visiting Martin Luther King Jr. at the peak of the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott, journalist William Worthy almost sat on a loaded pistol. Just for self-defense, Dr. King assured him. Just for self-defense, Dr. King assured him. It was not the only weapon Dr. King kept for such a purpose. One of his advisors remembered the Reverend's Montgomery, Alabama home as an arsenal. As an arsenal. This is turn the other cheek, Dr. King, that they say they don't, when every Dr. King Day, and they talk about the I Have a Dream speech, and the original name of the speech wasn't I Have a Dream. The original name of the speech was Normalcy Never Again. Then the name is going to be changed to A Canceled Check. The speech wasn't about a dream, as I've said before, when you study the history of it. When even in the first Eyes on the Prize series, they didn't talk about African Americans owning guns. They didn't talk about Dr. King owning guns either. Okay. They got a little more radical with the second Eyes on the Prize series when they interview Kwame Ture and they talk about the Deacons for Defense and Justice, things like this. But they don't deal with that in the first Eyes on the Prize series, even though there's good information there, but they just leave some stuff out. I mean, the first Eyes on the Prize series, they only deal with Malcolm X for about 90. And that's like in 60, that's like 64, 65. They only deal with Malcolm X for like 90 seconds. Now, like King, many ostensibly nonviolent civil rights activists embrace their constitutional right to self-protection, yet this crucial dimension of the Afro-American freedom struggle has been long ignored by history and mainstream media also, and Dr. King's celebration sponsored by corporations, every Dr. King Day, all that stuff. They don't talk about this stuff here. Like Dr. King, many ostensibly nonviolent civil rights activists, which means on the surface it gives the appearance, but underneath is something different. They use the cover of it looking like a nonviolent movement, but it's Negroes with guns protecting the civil rights workers. Civil rights activists embrace their constitutional right to self-protection, yet this crucial dimension of the Afro-American freedom struggle has been long ignored by history. In this nonviolent stuff that gets you killed, civil rights scholar Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. describes the vital role that armed self-defense played in the survival and liberation of African American communities in America during the Southern Freedom Movement of the 1960s. In the Deep South, African Americans often safeguarded themselves and their loved ones from white supremacist violence by bearing and, when necessary, using firearms. Most of these civil rights leaders own guns. Fannie Lou Hamer talks about, I keep a shot. I'm going to clean it up here for FCC regulated radio. But Fannie Lou Hamer said, I keep a shotgun in every corner of my bedroom, and the first white man that looks like he's going to throw some dynamite on my porch won't live to write his mother. That's Fannie Lou Hamer. See, we know the quote, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, but they don't talk about Fannie Lou Hamer owning guns. In much the same way, Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. shows nonviolent civil rights workers received critical support from black gun owners in the regions where they worked. If it had not been for Negroes with guns, there would not have been a civil rights movement. Whether patrolling their neighborhoods, garrisoning their homes, or firing back at attackers, these courageous men and women and the weapons they carried were crucial to the movement's success, giving voice to the World War II veterans, rural activists, volunteer security guards, and self-defense groups who took up arms to defend their lives and liberties. The book, This Nonviolent Stuff That Gets You Killed, How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible, lays bare the paradoxical relationship between the nonviolent civil rights struggle and the Second Amendment. Drawing on his firsthand experiences in the civil rights movement and interviews with fellow participants, Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. provides a controversial examination of the crucial place of firearms in the fight for American freedom. Read this book here. So the next Dr. King Day celebration should be different than a lot of this other Simple Simon ass stuff that people have been masquerading as Dr. King Day celebration. I'm just saying, okay, if we ain't going to do it right, don't do it at all. A lot of this BS masquerading as Dr. King. When I interviewed Mukasa Dada, Willie Ricks, who helped coin the term Black Power, and he was friends with Dr. King, he said every Dr. King Day he cries. Yeah, he misses Dr. King, but he cries because of what's masquerading as celebrations of Dr. King that don't really tell the truth about Dr. King and the civil rights movement and things like this. All right. Okay. Let's shift gears here. I want to get to this clip here dealing with Jamaica. All right. So we talked about Jamaica. We're going to go to clip 3. We talked about Jamaica petitioning Great Britain, Queen Elizabeth II, for reparations. We talked about this last week sometime. I don't remember when. All these shows are archived. You can go back and watch it. We rebroadcast these shows throughout the day on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. So on the Cross Connection with Tiffany Cross on MSNBC on Saturday, July 24th, she discussed this topic, and she had my friend on, Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who is a nephew of one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Okay. And they talked about Jamaica seeking reparations from Great Britain. Let's go to this clip.
Joining me now is historian Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, editor of Understanding and Teaching the Civil Rights Movement, and Henry Bantu, journalist and freelance broadcaster based in London. Gentlemen, I'm very excited to have this discussion. Very happy to have you with me. Henry, I want to start with you because I think a lot of folks in America assume that Black Americans were the only enslaved people. They're like social media movements that are very anti-immigrant when it comes to other Black folks. But the diaspora has been largely impacted by Europe, quite frankly. Given the atrocities that the UK brought upon Black people who were enslaved, what are the chances that Jamaicans will see any kind of reparations from the Crown?
I think the chances are slim to none if you're talking about money directly from the British government going directly to the Jamaican government in reparations for slavery, anything like the $10.6 or so billion that were quoted. Why? Well, listen to what David Cameron said when he was in Jamaica 5-6 years ago. He said, let's move on as friends. Let's accept that something awful happens, but we are now the best of friends, we're partners, and we will try and develop together. We'll try and put this behind us. Boris Johnson, the current Prime Minister, is a celebrant of all things empire. He's urged the British people to, yes, acknowledge the evil that went on, but consider Britain to be a benign power in the world, a force for good. When it comes to slavery, that was an awful thing that happened over there in the Americas. It was appalling. Just like what happened to George Floyd was appalling. But Britain helped to end slavery. Britain was not the great enslaver. Of course, those of us in the African and Caribbean communities the activists who hold reparations marches every year, we would beg to differ, and quite strongly.
Not only do you beg to differ, history does. I mean, Hassan, Britain, during the slave trade between 1640 and 1807, it's estimated that Britain transported 3.1 million Africans to the Caribbean, to North America, and to South America. So given this latest global discussion around reparations, what impact could this have on the reparations debate right here in this country?
Well, the reparations debate needs to be a global debate because the transatlantic slavery was just that. It was a global commerce, a global trade in human beings. That's how the hell we got here, Tiffany. It wasn't by accident. It was on the ships of enslavers. And so it needs to be a global debate. African Americans should not just focus on sort of reparations solely for the descendants of enslaved people in the Americas. Certainly there's an American component, there's an American responsibility. But there is a British component. There is a French component. We can't understand the current economies of the Caribbean. We can't understand the current economies and political situations on the continent of Africa, or even for us as African Americans, without putting it into a global context as it connects to the transatlantic slave trade.
It's a very good point. And I mean, look, we could talk about this all day. But Henry, because this is originating, it was a fight between Jamaica and the UK. I'm curious because this is not the first time this reparations debate came about in 2015. You already talked about David Cameron's response at the time, very consistent with other UK leaders. But I do feel like there is a shift in the conversation happening right now. You mentioned George Floyd in the English city of Bristol. People toppled a statue there of a former enslaver. Can the people in Britain, the descendants of the enslaved in Britain, rise up? And I should make this point for our viewers. The folks who are enslaved in Britain, they didn't start out there. You know, they came there to Africa, or from Africa, rather. Is it possible that the folks in Britain can aid this fight?
Well, just as there were huge numbers of British people in the 18th century who mobilized, who petitioned, who supported politicians in the House of Commons and showed that they thought what was happening in the Caribbean was appalling, was immoral and unchristian. Now we're seeing people, since the death of George Floyd, looking at receipts. They're putting huge pressure on major companies that made millions, if not billions, out of the transatlantic slave trade, like Lloyd's of London, like the universities, Oxford, Cambridge, Glasgow, like the great museums, like the thousands of houses and historical stately homes in London, in Bristol, in Liverpool, that denote their wealth and their heritage from the transatlantic slave trade. And we're seeing people picketing now, wealthy Tory MPs who are the distant relatives of slavers, of planters. And this is not going away. And as a result of the pressure, we're seeing museums being named. So, and also business centres like the Cass Museum, the Jeffrey Museum, the posters, all the slave traders who made huge amounts of money off the backs of enslaved and murdered Africans 300 or so years ago, left major endowments, but now people are saying, right, we've seen the receipt, we think you need to pay. If the British government doesn't want to, we can target you companies and landowners individually. We're not going to get away with it. That pressure is going to tell. It's not going away.
Well, I do just want to read a statement that we did get from the UK. We asked the British government about Jamaica's pending request. A spokesman for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office said there is no disputing the horrors of what occurred during the slave trade and the colonial period. While we acknowledge that the wounds run very deep, we believe that the most effective way for the UK today to respond to the cruelty of the past is to ensure that current and future generations do not forget what happened and to address modern day slavery and racism. Hassan, that's quite the word salad. That doesn't really say anything. I hear you, Henry. Hassan, let me ask you, the frustration, and trust me, Henry, I echo your frustration. The nerve, the caucasity of that statement, when we set our eyes on the world and look at how systemic white supremacy is still impacting all of us. If you're able, even what's happening in Haiti is a direct result of what came out of Europe. What's your thought on their statement and the landscape that we see today?
Well, let's remember that the British government just finished paying off enslavers, compensating them, for 181 years. They've been paying former enslavers and the descendants of enslavers following emancipation, following the abolition of slavery. And we see the same thing in Haiti. The French government forcing the Haitian government for more than a century to pay compensation for their own freedom that has led to the current destabilization.
All right, hey, pause it right there, guys.
I mean,
pause it right there.
That the British government or any former nation that supported
stop the clip right there, Anthony or Jalen.
Just to remember, while at the same time that.
All right, pause the clip right there. Okay, guys, those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching. We're going to keep broadcasting for a few more minutes and finish up this clip. We'll talk briefly about Emmett Till. We'll talk more about this on Monday's show. Be sure to register for my new 10-week online course, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. This class meets on Saturdays, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do the class live. All the sessions are recorded. As soon as you register, you can watch class number 1. Okay, and then we'll see you back in class on Saturdays for class number 2. All right. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. All right. Stand by, everybody. Stand by. Okay. All right. Also, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN Show, paypal.me / the AHN Show. All right. We're going to keep going for a couple more minutes here. There were a couple of articles I was showing while we were listening to that clip from Cross Connection, Tiffany Cross's show. So you have this one here from Reuters. We talked about this one a few days ago here on the show from Reuters. Jamaica plans to seek reparations from Britain over slavery. So read this article, but I want to go to page 2 of the article. An estimated 600,000 Africans were shipped to toil in Jamaica, according to the National Library of Jamaica. Seized from Spain by the English in 1655, because Jamaica is conquered by Columbus and the Spanish in 1494. Seized from Spain by the English in 1655, Jamaica was a British colony until it became independent in 1962. The West Indian country, of almost 3 million people, is part of the Commonwealth, and the British monarch remains head of state. Okay, the British monarch remains head of state of Great Britain, even though of Jamaica, even though Jamaica declared its independence in 1962. Now, Britain prohibited trade in slaves in its empire in 1807. That's the importation of Africans to be slaves. That's the international transatlantic slave trade. They abolished that in 1807. The U.S. abolished it in 1808, but they did not formally abolish the practice of slavery until 1834. Okay. To compensate British slave owners, the British government took out a 20 million pound loan, a very large sum at the time, and only finished paying off the ensuing interest payments in 2015. The British government, they paid reparations to about 46,000 British slave owners, but did not pay reparations to the Africans they enslaved or their descendants. The reparations petition is based on a private motion by Jamaican lawmaker Mike Henry, who said it's worth some 7.6 billion pounds, a sum he estimated is roughly equivalent to today in today's terms to what Great Britain paid to slave owners, the reparations Great Britain paid to slave owners. So it's estimated it's about $10 billion that they're talking about. Okay. All right. So read this article here from Reuters.com. Jamaica plans to seek reparations from Britain over slavery. And this is from July 12th, 2021. All right. And then this other piece from This is from TheGuardian.com, and we talked about this. And I deal with this in my online class also. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. But when we talked about Jamaica a few days ago here in the show, I showed you this article. This is from, I think it's 2015. Yes, September 30th, 2015. David Cameron, who was then Prime Minister of Great Britain, was planning a trip to Jamaica. The Jamaicans were saying they wanted an official apology for slavery and they wanted reparations. David Cameron, this article here, Jamaica should move on from painful legacy of slavery, says David Cameron. And David Cameron said, let's see here. David Cameron has called for Jamaica and the UK to move on from the deep wounds caused by slavery, but ducked official calls for Britain to apologize for its role, for its role or pay reparations. Speaking to the Caribbean country's parliament, Prime Minister David Cameron, this is in 2016, struck a defiant note as he spoke of his pride that Britain had played a part in abolishing the abhorrent slave trade, without highlighting its historic involvement in the transfer of African slaves from West Africa and ownership of slaves in the Caribbean. He called for the two countries to, quote, move on from this painful legacy and continue to build for the future. Well, it's easy to move on when you have something to move with. A lot of the wealth that Great Britain has is built on the backs of exploiting Africans in Jamaica, okay, and other colonies, and in Nigeria and Kenya and things like this. So read this article here. Jamaica should move on from painful legacy of slavery. Okay. David Cameron said in 2016, Prime Minister of Great Britain. It's easy to move on when you have something to move with. This is why in 2018, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, I told you she's marrying into a family of colonizers. I'm not calling them colonizers because they're white. I'm calling them colonizers because 100 years ago, 1/5 of the world population lived under British rule. Okay. She married into a family of colonizers. All right. We're going to, let's see, let me go back to this clip here from the Cross Connection, and then we'll squeeze this in quickly dealing with Emmett Till. We'll talk more about Emmett Till on tomorrow's show. Okay. Let's go to this here. That'll queue up. All right. We'll come back to that in just a second here. And then, okay, we'll go to this, the Emmett Till. Emmett Till would have been 80 years old today. And he's being honored by two Mississippi museums. Okay. Let's go back to this clip here from the Cross Connection.
Going away.
Well, I do just want to read a statement that we did get from the UK. We asked the British government about Jamaica's pending request. A spokesman for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office said there is no disputing the horrors of what occurred during the slave trade and the colonial period. While we acknowledge that the wounds run very deep, we believe that the most effective way for the UK today to respond to the cruelty of the past is to ensure that current and future generations do not forget what happened, and to address modern day slavery and racism. Hassan, that's quite the word salad that doesn't really say anything. Exactly. I hear you, Henry. Hassan, let me ask you the frustration, and trust me, Henry, I echo your frustration. The nerve, the caucasity of that statement. When we set our eyes on the world and look at how systemic white supremacy is still impacting all of us. If you're able, even what's happening in Haiti is a direct result of what came out of Europe. What's your thought on their statement and the landscape that we see today?
Well, let's remember that the British government just finished paying off enslavers, compensating them. 181 years they've been paying former enslavers and the descendants of enslavers following emancipation, following the abolition of slavery. And we see the same thing in Haiti. The French government forcing the Haitian government for more than a century to pay compensation for their own freedom that has led to the current destabilization in the nation as a whole. So, I mean, the idea that the British government or any former nation that supported enslavement would say, hey, it's good enough just to remember, while at the same time that they have been extracting and paying of former enslavers is just patently absurd as well as hypocritical.
Okay. So that is from Cross Connection by Tiffany Cross on MSNBC. So check out that clip here. Also, check out this article. We'll probably talk about this some more tomorrow's show. I talked about this a little bit when it came out. This is from USA Today. This deals with Great Britain paying reparations to slave owners. Fact check: United Kingdom finished paying off debts to slave owning families in 2015. This is from June 30th, 2020, USA Today. So check that out also. All right, very quickly here. Let's look at this piece here on, there's an article from thegrio.com dealing with Emmett Till. Emmett Till's birthday to be honored by two Mississippi museums. Emmett Till's birthday to be honored by two Mississippi museums. July 25th would have been Emmett Till's 80th birthday. To commemorate, let me flip over to this here. To commemorate his life, two museums in Mississippi, the state where he was murdered, will honor him. Both the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum and the Mississippi and the Museum of Mississippi History, which are located side by side in Jackson, Mississippi, will give a 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. guided tour, a 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. guided tour that will highlight Emmett Till's life and legacy. As stated in the Facebook event post, each museum will also be offering free admission from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. There's a tweet here from Bernice King, daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, that talks about Emmett Till. Let me put this here. All right, if we look at this, hashtag Emmett Till would have turned 80 years old today, thinking of and praying for his family, remembering the grief and courage of his mother, Mamie Till Mobley. Devastating still. Now, as Pamela DC Jr., director of both museums, said, as we embark on the birthday of our beloved Emmett Till, let's reflect on how this young man created a movement of people who wanted more for themselves and their communities. In honor of the day that he was born, July 25th, 1941, the two Mississippi museums will offer free admission to our visitors to read and learn more about the life of this 14-year-old who was taken from the world too soon. End quote. Now, Emmett Till, a native of Chicago, Illinois, was visiting what was sent by his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, to visit with his extended family for the first time near Money, Mississippi in the summer of 1955. In the early morning hours of August 28, 1955, a group of white men, J.W. Milliman and Roy Bryant, entered the home of Emmett Till's relatives where he was staying, abducted him, beat him, killed him, and dumped his body over a bridge into a river, because it was alleged that he made a romantic pass at a white woman, Carolyn Bryant, outside of a grocery store in town. During Emmett Till's funeral, Mamie Till elected to keep her son's casket open, keep her son's casket open so that everyone could see his bloated, mutilated face and remains. She said, I want the world to see what they did she said, let the people see what they did to my boy. And this was on the cover of, this was in Jet Magazine. Jet Magazine covered it. African-American newspapers covered this, as well as the trial, the sham of a trial of Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam. Now, let the people see what they did to my boy, Mamie said, according to Emmett Till's biography reported by NPR, National Public Radio. Those photos of Emmett Till and his casket ran in Jet Magazine and other African-American publications. It would be 30 years later that most Americans would see the damage done to her son as the image led the renowned Eyes on the Prize documentary, as well as a half-hour documentary on Emmett Till that aired in 1985 per National Public Radio. Because Eyes on the Prize starts out with the lynching of Emmett Till. The two white men, Roy Bryant, Carolyn Bryant's husband, and John W. Millam, J.W. Millam, John William Millam, also known as J.W. Millam, Roy Bryant's half-brother, were indicted for Emmett Till's abduction and murder. However, according to the United States Civil Rights Trail, both men, I think it should be Civil Rights Trial, both men were acquitted by a jury made of all white males. In 2008, Carolyn Bryant admitted that Emmett Till never made a pass at her. When her confession was published in a 2017 book, the previously closed case of Emmett Till's murder was reopened by the United States Justice Department. Also, so those two white men were acquitted in killing Emmett Till. Then a few months later, they did an interview in Look magazine, and they were paid $4,000 for that interview, and they admitted killing Emmett Till in that interview. Everybody knew they killed Emmett Till before the trial. They admitted killing Emmett Till in that interview, but since they were acquitted because of double jeopardy laws, they could not be tried again. So here's a picture of Emmett Till also. Read the rest of this article here from thegrio.com. Emmett Till's birthday to be honored by two Mississippi museums. Okay. And this is by Matthew Allen for thegrio.com, July 25th, 2021. All right. Look, we have to get out of here. Once again, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. We're here 6 days a week. This helps us to keep doing the research, keep broadcasting, finance the show, pay some of the bills, etc. We're going to post a link here. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and you can register for the new 10-week online course that I'm teaching. 10 consecutive Saturdays from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. We do this on Saturdays, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here on register here. This is right on the homepage of our website. It takes you to the next page, and you can just click on enroll. And as soon as you enroll, you can watch class 1. It's archived. We have some bonus content that you can watch. You'll also get, as a bonus, in digital download format, you'll also get my six lecture bundle pack, Black Migration 1619 to 2019. Black Migration 1619 to 2019. You'll also get that as a bonus as well. Okay. All right. Look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. And we're here Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Sundays also. Okay. And we'll post